Have a good day.
What do you think your father would have said about your actions today? Sam, do you have any statements for the press today?
Hello, I'm Kurt Mattila, the director of Tron the Next Day, and I'm here on the Geek Power to answer some questions about the Tron universe. Well, I was excited for a couple of reasons. One, I was very familiar with the original film, and I was a big fan. And I had seen and heard a lot about Legacy. I had seen the motion test that Joe Kosinski revealed at Comic-Con, so I was already kind of excited about it as it was. And I also needed a job, so that was the second thing that I was excited about. And I think I got way more excited once I realized that I had, because it wasn't quite clear what the job was, and because they just said we have all this stuff, we're not sure what to do. So when I was able to sort of articulate what I wanted to do by make the sort of 10-minute proper short that ties everything together, and when they went, oh, okay, that sounds good, then I got really excited, because then I realized, okay, now we can kind of do our thing. And I joke because we made a 10-minute studio film with no interference. Like, no producers got involved. No one was telling us what we could and couldn't do. And I looked at my friends who was working on it with me. I was like, guys, don't get used to this, because this will never happen again. We will never have like carte blanche to make something for a studio where there isn't any interference. So I was very excited by that. I didn't have any, but I sort of seized upon the opportunity to put together a pitch for what the third movie could be. I wasn't sure, I had heard that they were thinking about doing something. There was talk about, a teaser where an actual light cycle was going to be in the real world, like somehow the grid world was going to invade the real world. But my friend Rob and I, who wrote The Next Day, we really kind of got into the sort of mythology of the early days of Kevin Flynn and Dillinger and all this stuff. And we had this idea that ultimately, I think, wasn't stolen by anything, but like Chris Cantwell's Halt and Catch Fire series, which is extraordinary. It's on AMC. I remember watching that going, oh, that's pretty much, yeah, that's a better version of what we were talking. Like, just to sort of, I wanted to seize the opportunity to try and pitch a Tron movie where it wasn't a sequel, but like a prequel. It's like the early days of NCOM and like, all that like early 80s, figuring out the grid and programming. But Halt and Catch Fire did a much better job. So it wound up working for the best. Oh, what the third movie was about?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Garrett Hedlund, who played Sam Flynn, who I shot at the end of Tron the Next Day, it turned out he was a neighbor of mine. He lived around the corner because, I had mentioned how we had to do so much work in a little bit amount of time. So I was working a lot on this, and I went to my local coffee shop, sleep deprived and dazed. And I'm like, is that Sam Flynn? Like, I thought I was hallucinating, but I was like, Garrett. It's like, oh, hey. So the reason I'm telling this is because he had just met with Joe a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about what the third film could be. And I just remember him, and I was a little sleep deprived, but I just remember him saying that, yeah, they were going to be talking about, again, how the grid could invade the real world, and how Sam just sort of becomes almost like Neo, like he becomes this all-powerful guy in the grid. And from what I recall, they got so far as to pre-production on that film, and then they wound up canceling it for, who knows why. But as you know, they just canceled Batgirl for even stranger reasons. So, you never know these things. But from what I was able to gather, They were not interested in the Halt and Catch Fire version, but they were doing something about, I think it was going to be, I think instead of Cillian Murphy, they were going to get Jared Leto to be some sort of, crazy tech entrepreneur who was going to figure out how to pull the Tron world out into our world, I think. It was pitched to me that it was primarily supposed to sort of bridge the gap of the two films, but they didn't want to say, they didn't want to commit to the idea of it being a teaser for a next film, because I think at the time they weren't sure, because the movie hadn't come out yet, so they had no sort of measure of success if this was going to work or not. So they didn't use the word teaser, but I was like, this is a teaser for the third film. Oh, kidding. That's why we did the end of the line thing. So yeah, it had the dual purposes. No, I mean, the fact that you picked up on the comic books is pretty good. That's a pretty good detail. Let's see. I think now that's some of the. I mean, we used a lot. We were able to use a lot of the Daft Punk music, which was awesome. I had to voice Zack Attack. The Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah. Because there wasn't anything we left out, because there was so much we had to kind of cram in when we revealed the hacker there, and who has his lawyer while he's giving his interview and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think you mind the sort of the Easter egg details of everything. Right. Actually, you know what? I just realized one more detail. I have a movie on Disney Plus now called Stuntman. Yes. Executive produced by The Rock and all that stuff. And my first experience with stunts was on Tron the next day, and I realized how they can go wrong. So if you recall, at the climactic scene is, Sam coming in on the motorcycle, and he pulls up and he gets off and all that kind of stuff. Well, Garrett Hedlund was in New York at the time, so this shot at the very end where he's by the elevator, that was actually in New York. And then the motorcycle leading up was shot in Los Angeles. So we needed a double for Sam to come in the motorcycle. And we cast a guy that looks just like Garrett Hedlund. And on his resume, it says, yes, I absolutely know how to ride motorcycles. We're like, great. And we get there, all the lights are ready to go. I got a crowd of extras to play reporters and action. Guy did not know how to ride a motorcycle. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like who lies about riding a motorcycle when the part's going to be a motor? And so my poor producer, who knows how to ride motorcycles, who's this cool Mexican dude, had to put all these gloves on to cover up his his wrists and stuff, and he had to drive the bike in. But anyway, that's so anyway. I was like, oh, stunts are tough, man. They never go right. And then then they went fine in the next thing. Oh, the look, especially in the first film, I hadn't realized how much of one of my favorite artists is Sid Mead, this great futurist. He did a lot of work for Blade Runner, and he had done a lot of design work for Tron that I didn't quite know about. And until you really start looking at some of the imagery, especially in the original stuff, you really see a lot of Sid Mead in there, and that look always kind of got me. And what was interesting about the stuff I don't have is that a lot of it, they shot it in black and white and then hand painted all that color. So these stills are like these beautiful black and white. And so I was like, I don't know what they're going to do in the third movie, but they got to use this palette. It's stunning, this grainy blue. It's almost like a German from the 20s. It just had this amazing look. But I like that, and I liked how how they were able to kind of sort of from a thematic standpoint really kind of predict the sort of merging of both worlds, the virtual world and the real world, very ahead of its time. I didn't actually play it. Despite my love for comics and science fiction and tabletop games. I'm not a giant video game player, mainly because I'm very bad and I don't want to break the console with when I get angry, you know, if I lose. But I didn't play. But I hear it's awesome. Yeah, I didn't. I've seen clips of it here and there. A friend of mine, Director O, this guy who used to work on Avatar: The Last Airbender, he directed some of the episodes, so he would show me some clips of that. So I've seen moments, and I think the look is extraordinary. I mean, they did a really nice job with that. It really feels like Akira on steroids. I mean, it's really an interesting looking animated show.
I know.
I haven't seen Tron Destiny. That's the fan film, right? That was made.
Yes.
I may have seen it. It's from like 2010, right? Like it's from a while ago, right? All right, I'll have to rewatch that. I remember that coming out and going, oh shit, what are they not doing what we're doing, are they? And I remember going, okay, no, it's
Yeah, it's
different.
great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it. I think I may have seen bits of it, but I do remember it being a fan film. Yeah.
Explanation.
Yes. So the chorus scene, I seem to recall reading the script, and because I had gotten the script of the movie while they were working on it, and I seem to recall there being an epilogue scene where almost like a bonus scene, like in the Marvel movies, where Nick Fury was recruiting the Avengers, where Cora comes driving in on the Ducati. She comes in. Who's this mysterious person? She takes off the helmet, reveals it's Cora, played by Olivia Wilde, and she got to talks to the press and says, I've seen Flynn, he's alive, and basically sort of everything that we learned as the audience, she's telling the world. And I remember going, oh, that's really cool. And while we were figuring out the ending for the next day, I think I recall going, oh, we should do something similar to that because that was kind of neat. But instead of Cora, it should be Sam coming on the Ducati and he has a jacket. So not only does he reveal himself with the helmet, he then reveals that he's supporting the Flynn Lives movement with his T-shirt. Absolutely. I didn't see much of the Uprising animated show. I have a lot of friends in animation, but yeah, if there's any kind of Tron-based live action thing, absolutely. I love the world, I love the characters, and it just the vibe too. I think because Joe Kosinski, especially with the last film with the Daft Punk music and the look game, I think there's really a good vibe and mood that has been sort of birthed in that second film. I do. It's a very sort of strange thing when you think about it, especially with Disney. I think a lot of their sort of original properties, from the Black Hole to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Tron, these sort of science fiction efforts that were sort of put forth in the late 70s, early 80s, it seems like either they can't quite figure out how to revitalize them, or they just want to put their efforts towards Star Wars and Marvel, which is totally understandable. I mean, that's definitely like a huge spotlight. But I often wonder what decisions get made to sort of not push the ball forward for the Tron films. I understand that Legacy, didn't necessarily do what they were expecting, but it did remarkably well. It wasn't like a flop by any stretch of the imagination. So it's interesting, what that future is. I have hope, because I think from a pure business standpoint, it's sitting there. There's this there's this world that's ready to kind of ready to keep going, and more stories to be told. And, you know, whether it's in the past, you know, again, the Halt and Catch Fire version, or the future, you know, going back into the grid, you know, I think they got to at some point realize that there's fans like us who would love to see and hear more about this world. I think hopefully smarter heads. They need someone like a Kevin Feige to take the reins, because I think that's what's missing. I think the Tron IP, the Tron world at Disney's just sort of left to all the executives who, you know, don't have like, oh, this is it, I'm gonna lead this thing franchise in the future. So I think they just need the right people to get excited about it again at that company.